Welcome into Off the Hook Sports. I am Caleb Calhoun. Dave Hooker had a previous commitment that has actually gone along a little longer than we thought, so he has to wrap that up. We hope to have him on the show later in the next hour, but that may or may not happen. We've still got a monster show to get to after the weekend slate of games in the NCAA Tournament. Tennessee basketball falls to Houston. We'll ask if it was more Tennessee or Houston that calls Tennessee's poor play on Sunday. We're going to talk about a unique situation of foul trouble hurting the Vols against Houston and the history of that with Tennessee, because it's just some bad luck. We're going to look at the legacies of Jemai Mashack and Zakai Ziegler, whose careers came to an end on Sunday. Also, the legacies of the Bob Kessling era. That ended on Sunday, too, as he called his last game with Tennessee's loss to Houston. On the women's side, the Lady Vols, we're going to talk about their loss to Texas and the future of the program. And we're also going to talk about what should be done with Rick Barnes, whether or not Tennessee basketball would be better or worse off if he stayed or left. So a lot to cover today. I know Timothy McGee jumped in and says, hello, negative Nancy, LOL. Timothy, I'm trying to not be negative, but the day after Tennessee's men's and women's programs lose, we have to break down the loss, and we have to break down the losses, and we have to break down how things are going before we can turn the page and start covering the future. That's just the way things are. So lots to get to. Please hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn the notifications on, tell a friend. We're building something great at Off the Hook Sports. The show is brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. We're live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. Let's get started with today's tough question. Tennessee got blown out by Houston 69-50 in the Elite Eight on Sunday. The story was Tennessee only scoring 15 points in the first half, which was an NCAA record low in the Elite Eight for a seed as high as Tennessee's. They shot 1 of 15 from three, missed their first 14 attempts. So I'm going to ask this question very simply, and it's going to be the poll question. Did Tennessee just have a bad shooting night, or did Houston's defense have something to do with it? That's the poll question. I'm setting it up now. Please vote if you can. I'm going to write it out because it's just me today. I have to write out the poll question as we do this. So again, the question is this: did Tennessee just have a bad shooting game, or did Houston's defense cause it? And the options will be Vols just shot poorly, Houston's defense caused it. Those are your answers. Go ahead and vote on it now. Today's tough question, again, brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, BanksandJones.com. I'm going to say Tennessee, believe it or not, their bad shooting performance was caused by Houston. Now, let me explain. Tennessee had some great looks in the final 10 minutes of the first half, and they missed them. So I could understand why you would think they just shot poorly. Here's what's missed about that, though. The first 10 minutes of the game, really the first 9, when Tennessee only scored 2 points in the first 5 and then another 2 in the next 4. Houston's defense suffocated Tennessee and took them out of their rhythm. Here's how Tennessee likes to play offense. Okay, they don't really do the dribble drive, but they do like to get into the paint and then dish, or they like to come off screens. Chaz Lanier likes to either come off screens and have space, or Zakai Ziegler likes to drive, and then they kick it out to Chaz Lanier, or even Igor Miličić, Jordan Gainey, whoever it may be. And sometimes the ball comes back out to Zakai Ziegler, and he'll have space for a 3-2. Houston was doing 2 things very successfully yesterday, and this has to do with Kelvin Sampson's kind of 3-2 matchup zone that he runs a lot. They had the size, even with foul trouble, which we'll get into, to crowd the paint. So Tennessee couldn't drive and kick. They couldn't drive and kick at all. On top of that, on the perimeter, they were coming around all the ball screens. And this was very evident in the first 9 minutes of the half. Tennessee had trouble adjusting. And because they had trouble adjusting to that, for the first 9 minutes, I think that was Houston's defense that held them to 4 points. Now, the second 10 minutes come, and Tennessee's just shooting poorly from 3, even though they're adjusting and they're starting to get good looks. Here's the issue. By that point, they're already down 15-4, 19-6. Houston's running away with it. Once the other team starts running away with it, it's in your head, and you start to struggle shooting the ball even more. and things spiral. And that's exactly what happened to Tennessee in this game on Sunday. I think Houston's defense, the first 9 minutes, put them up comfortably. By the time Tennessee was able to adjust, they were already spiraling and worried about how the game was getting out of hand. That made it only worse to allow Houston to build a 21-point lead at one point in the first half and to go into halftime up 34-15. And Tennessee was just never able to recover. So while I understand the thought that Tennessee shot poorly, and they did, I think they finished the game. You guys can correct me on this, but was it 5 of 29? I think they were 5 of 29 from three. Even as they adjusted in the second half, they went 4 of 14 at the second half, so they weren't great. I think you have to give credit to Houston's defense. There's a few things that, given the way Tennessee's constructed, they just weren't able to handle with Houston. Part of this is their injuries. Okay, if JP Estrella is fully healthy, if Cameron Carr is still on the team, we might be talking about a different type of game, because if JP Estrella is healthy, they can throw him out there and play a little bit bigger and dump it down low to Estrella, and then Estrella can kick it out. They didn't really have a true offensive big they could dump it down low to throughout the year, and that proved costly in this game, okay? Because then that would have forced Houston to collapse and had given them more options. But because of the way things went down, I think Houston's defense actually caused a lot of what happened yesterday. And you have to give Kelvin Sampson and Houston credit. Look, Kelvin Sampson, this is his second Final Four in 5 years, his third Final Four in his career. He has been a very, very successful head coach at Oklahoma, Indiana. I know he had the issue at Indiana that got him fired, and then he comes right back to Houston and builds a program there. This dude knows ball. Okay, Kelvin Sampson's a heck of a coach. He and Rick Barnes have a great connection, and I think you have to give more credit to Houston. Everybody can look at what they didn't do and what their team didn't do. Houston had a ton to do with what Tennessee didn't do. And so I think with that in mind, I think that Tennessee, particularly in a game where the refs let him play, and I'm not knocking that, I think you want the refs to let him play in the NCAA tournament, had trouble getting its offense free-flowing the way they needed it to. The lack of offensive presence in the post proved very costly. They couldn't get the spacing they needed for Chaz Lanier to go off the way he likes to go off in space. And Igor Milicic couldn't be a threat driving to the basket. Would have been a big help if he could, honestly. One of the bigger knocks on this game is that Igor Milicic didn't do what he should have done, which is, as a stretch four, you want him to shoot well from three, but he also is supposed to be good at driving to the basket. If you let him drive to the basket from the top, he should have the size to be able to make an impact, particularly if Houston's not going to collapse and stay around the perimeter, which happened a lot. So I think that, honestly, Tennessee just, yes, they shot poorly, but I think they shot poorly because Houston took them out of their rhythm in the first half. I'm going to get your guys' thoughts in 1 second. But first, the show is brought to you by Banks & Jones, T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. Banks & Jones.
All right, welcome back. Going to the poll question, did Tennessee just have a bad shooting game, or did Houston's defense cause it? 67% say Vols just shot poorly. 33% say Houston's defense caused it. I'm going with the 33%. It's now 68-32, 28 if you guys have voted. Look, I get your issues with how Tennessee shot, but I think there's just a lot of things that went into play on that. To go to the message board for a few things that people are saying, Timothy McGee goes, negative Caleb. We just got beat. The ball wasn't falling. Yes, the ball wasn't falling, Timothy, but I guess my point is sometimes people say, oh, you just shot poorly or you just shot well. And we ignore, like, sometimes the other team has something to do with that. I mean, that happens a lot. I think one of the reasons Kentucky shot poorly the other night was Tennessee had something to do with it. So I think that we can't sit there and say that this was just, oh, it just happened to go out that way. You have to give Houston credit with this. So I think that I think this is I think it's just the way Houston ended up playing. Orange Blood says since conference play began this season, the Vols couldn't win more than 4 consecutive games, regardless of who they played. This was bound to happen. Still outperformed expectations in the tournament. I never thought about that, but you're right. I don't think they have won 4 straight. But the SEC was such a brutal league. General Ursa says Houston took the lanes in the paint away from ZZ, which is the thriving force behind the offense. Houston was faster, more physical, and flat out just wanted it more. I'm not going to say if they wanted it more or not, but I will say you are right, General Ursa. Zakai was taken completely out of his comfort zone with the way Houston took away the lanes in the paint. And Tennessee had no bigs to help. They couldn't come around the screens on the perimeter. So there was really just, it felt like there was nowhere for them to go before they finally adjusted. And Unsung says, can't fault Barnes for yesterday. Those guys were as cold as the Arctic Circle from the field. You're right. Look, I'm going to give Rick Barnes credit. He did adjust. Again, guys, 9 minutes into the game, he did find ways to allow more spacing, and Tennessee was missing at that point. The problem was they were so far behind. I think it got into their heads and they panicked a little bit. So that's just how it goes. David Speaks says it's going to be a transfer portal all season for sure. Like 90% of the production will be gone. David, you're right, but Barnes has proven he can handle that. David Speaks says they were definitely ice cold. On Sunday says they were missing wide open shots. Ben says the Vols got open looks. They didn't hit them. Yes, no, I agree, guys. They were missing open looks. I think we're missing, no pun intended, how they got the open looks, though. The first 9 minutes, they did not get open looks. They got no good looks from three. They rushed their threes a lot of times. They started to get the open looks in the second 10 minutes of the first half. By that point, Houston was in such control, I think it was in Tennessee's head. Now, you can knock them. They should have been a lot more composed once they did get the good looks, and they weren't. But the reason they weren't composed was because in the first 10 minutes, Houston took away their offense and forced them to adjust. And by the time they adjusted, Houston had a 15-4 lead. Bender String says, I feel like it always comes down to Barnes' of talent level and roster construction. It's borderline and mathematically stupid to get this close this many times and I guess we not get to the Final Four even once. Well, Bender Strings, you're forgetting that before the last 3 years, Barnes had missed this. Before 2019, Barnes had about a 10-year period where he missed the Sweet 16. So there were some issues like that. Ronnie Owensby says Tennessee was missing shots like the 2K sliders were turned all the way down. LOL. Funny enough, Bender Strings says not get to the Final Four. Yeah, I get what you mean, Bender Strings, but I think that there were just some bad breaks this year. So there were a lot of things going on. We got a lot to discuss with this. I think Houston did have a good defensive game plan for Tennessee. And I think when you take that into account, once Tennessee got their offensive flow and ball movement adjusted well, they just couldn't hit anything. And I think Houston was in their head because they had control. Derek jumps in and says, we were in their face. They shot good. We didn't. This is a typical Barnes team behavior. First half killed us. First shot was an air ball. Yes, Derek, I understand. But again, the first shot in the first 9 minutes was Houston's defense. I think we have to be fair on this. So there's just a lot to break down. Unsung says Houston scouted really well. I agree with all of you guys on that. So look, lots to discuss here. I think we have to bring up the point, though, that Houston, we have to give them credit for the way they played. We have to give them credit for the way the defense adjusted and handled things. And I think it took away some of the things Tennessee liked to do. And one element of Tennessee's basketball game was taken away because of foul trouble, which we're going to get to next. First, portions of the program are brought to you by Chattanooga Mortgage. Congratulations, your home search just got easier. Buying a home in Chattanooga has never been easier. Chat with 2tsmortgage.com. Chat with 2tsmortgage.com. All right. Something else happened on Sunday that I think is kind of indicative of sometimes bad breaks Tennessee gets. And I don't want to talk too much X's and O's after the game, but I know the day after we should. Houston, their defensive schemes were giving Tennessee trouble early, which is why they built that 9-4, 15-4 lead. But when they were up 9-3 at one point and Tennessee couldn't buy a field goal, the Vols defense was still in the game. Jawan Roberts, their skilled big man who averages 11 points a game, 6 rebounds a game, who was a force down low, got into foul trouble. He picked up his second foul and went to the bench. Kelvin Sampson brought in Terrence Arsenault at that point. Terrence Arsenault was playing at the 4, but he's much more of an athlete. He's 6'6", 205 pounds. And and more of a stretch four. Did Juwan Roberts' foul trouble for Houston actually hurt Tennessee even more? I think it might have. And we're going to play 4 downs on this. And you guys let me know what you think. But we are going to play 4 downs. So here's why I say Juwan Roberts' foul trouble actually cost Tennessee. When Houston's defense was giving Tennessee fits, particularly with their perimeter zone where the length was able to take away the paint, and also they were around coming off screens. At that point, Tennessee would have wanted to run tempo, because while Tennessee is one of the slower paced teams in college basketball outside of the top 300, just like Houston, they can turn it up and turn up the athleticism when they need to. They have Zakai Ziegler, for heaven's sake. Jemai Mashak was wildly athletic. So what they would have done, and you saw this, Barnes dialed up the press. He started dialing up the press. He started playing really tough defense, trap defense on the perimeter to try to deny the paint. I think it was working a little bit. And also when they would get rebounds, Tennessee would run out in transition. Once Terrence Arsenault came into the game, though, Houston had 4 guards with size. This is why they only turned it over 5 times on the day. Every time Tennessee seemed to get a fast break and try to run, Houston got back in time, because they had 4 athletes on the court and they weren't playing big. This is also what got in Tennessee's head, which is why you saw a couple of fast breaks where they had a 4-on-2, pulled back to slow it down. They had a 3-on-2 at one point, and Zakai Ziegler had a path to the basket. Kate Phillips was to his left, and Chaz Lanier was on the other side. 2 Houston defenders were between Phillips and Lanier, and Ziegler dumped it off to Phillips, which was a mistake. And then they had multiple times where they had other fast break numbers, and they pulled back and played half-court ball, which was not conducive to their style. Why was that? I firmly believe with Juwan Roberts on the bench and Terrence Arsenault in there, the athleticism of Houston was dialed up a notch and took away Tennessee's transition game. More importantly, Arsenault hit 2 threes during that time and scored 8 straight points at one point, which helped Houston take real control of the game, which is what led to Tennessee's lack of composure even more as they were missing open looks. So, the foul trouble, honestly, is, I think, something that hurt Tennessee in this game. And I'm going to go, we got 40 votes. I'm going to close out this poll question. Did Tennessee just have a bad shooting game, or did Houston's defense calls it? 68% say Vols just shot poorly. 32% say Houston's defense caused it. I'm going to ask this question. Did Juwan Roberts' early foul trouble, actually help Houston? Yes or no? I'm going to play 4 downs because we're going to go through a little bit of history here. Because this ain't the first time in a big game, in a postseason matchup, that a Tennessee Vols program has had to prepare for a certain level of personnel that it wasn't prepared to face because of a player going out. And let's just go ahead and break those down right now. I don't have the 4 downs elements, but let's just play 4 downs. We're going to start with 2000. Tennessee basketball in 2000, the last time this happened, was playing North Carolina. This was not your grandfather's North Carolina team, not your father's North Carolina team. North Carolina was an 8 seed, and in the period between Dean Smith and Roy Williams. Tennessee was a 4 seed with Tony Harris, Jerry Green as the head coach, Isaiah Victor, Charles Hathaway, CJ Black. I mean, just name after name. Vincent Yarbrough, Ron Slay, Marcus Hazlett, John Higgins, just loaded with talent. Tennessee was the favorite. They were the 4 seed. They were in a region where the 1, 2, and 3 seeds all got knocked out. So they had a clear path to the Final Four. This was a Sweet 16 game, and they built a 9-point lead on North Carolina in the second half. North Carolina got in foul trouble and brought in Julius Peppers. Yes, that Julius Peppers. And what happened? Tennessee couldn't buy a rebound on Julius Peppers, with Julius Peppers in there, and allowed North Carolina to get back in that game. And North Carolina came back and won 74-69 because of Peppers was rebounding underneath the basket and Jerry Green's inability to adjust. Surprise, surprise. That was 2000. About a year later, 2001. Football, the SEC championship. Tennessee was playing an LSU team that is not this current LSU team, okay? This was a mediocre program that was on the rise under Nick Saban, but wasn't great. LSU had finished the regular season 8-3. Tennessee finished 10-1, was number 2, going to play for the national championship, had just beaten second-ranked Florida on the road in Steve Spurrier's last home game. The same LSU team they blew out, they were dominating in the first half. They were up 17-7. LeBrandon Tofield goes down. Rohan Davey goes down. Rohan Davey was the quarterback. Hidden in that first half was the only touchdown LSU had was a drive that Rohan Davey missed, and Matt Malk went in and scored a touchdown. Rohan Davey goes down. Matt Malk comes in for the whole second half. Tennessee is not prepared for it because Rohan Davey's a pocket passer, and Matt Malk was a quarterback draw quarterback. Couldn't even throw the ball. Okay, it was just a threat with the draw, almost like Tim Tebow without the ability to pass. And Tennessee, unprepared, loses to LSU 31-20. 6 years later, Tennessee's playing LSU again in the SEC championship. They're preparing for Matt Flynn. The week of, Matt Flynn is out. Ryan Perrilloux comes in. And Tennessee can't defend Ryan Perrilloux. And Les Miles, to his credit, just throws in an option offense. And Ryan Perrilloux ends up leading LSU to a 21-14 win over Tennessee, largely because Eric Gaines threw 2 fourth-quarter interceptions that were devastating. And then came this Houston game. Jawan Roberts gets into foul trouble. And Terrence Arceneaux comes in, and that takes away what Tennessee is able to do. And I think that takes Tennessee out of their element. Does Tennessee have the worst luck with teams that get in foul trouble and against them, and then better teams come in? Because it certainly seems like that. Or am I just high? Well, let's find out, because portions of the program are brought to you by Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED for 10% off. You guys tell me. Am I reaching here? Or am I suggesting that Tennessee gets bad breaks when the other team loses players they planned to rely on and Tennessee hadn't adjusted? So it's Derek is accusing me, saying Caleb reminding Tennessee fans why we're a bitter fan base. Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry to bring out the history of this, guys, but that's just how it goes. Ben brings up, and this is a good point, it really doesn't change much if we're shooting as poorly as we were. They would have used their size to accelerate the lead if they weren't in foul trouble. But you see, Ben, I don't think that Tennessee's poor shooting would have been as much of a factor, because I think what would have happened is at the 10-minute mark, Tennessee would have turned up the tempo and played transition more. And once they played transition and got a few buckets that way, then they probably would have started to feel themselves and get more composure and be able to shoot well from 3 and get the spacing they needed. Now, they got the spacing they needed from 3, but they couldn't get the transition buckets in the final 10 minutes of the first half. So they stayed significantly behind. I don't think my contention is this, and I'm making this argument. I don't think Tennessee shoots as poorly if they don't get so far behind early, because they didn't get behind because they shot poorly. They got behind early because they didn't get good looks. And that's a credit to Houston's defense. So I think if they get that far behind, though, and then they're able to turn up transition and get a few buckets and make it closer, I think they actually start to shoot better in the final 10 minutes of the first half. So there's a lot that goes on here. This is where Jawan Roberts' foul trouble could have been a bit of an issue. So you guys let me know that. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm just reaching on here, but I think there is some truth to this matter. First, we're going to talk a little bit about this a little more in a second, but first, a quick message from Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in.
Welcome back to the program. Obviously, people are all over the place with their disagreements with me. I think it's fair to nail this down to Tennessee shooting poorly yesterday in their Elite Eight loss to Houston. What I'm trying to hammer down is why they shot poorly. I don't think it's just an off-day shooting. I think there were some other things that went into play, particularly with the way Houston plays. Pseudo Sham says it just spiraled out of control. I agree. And Ben comes in and says, give credit to Houston. They took all the confidence away from everyone early, and it just spiraled out of control. You guys are right, though. I mean, that's my thing. I think the reason Tennessee's poor shooting happened is because of the way things transpired within the first 9 minutes, in which at that point, things just completely spiraled out of control for Tennessee. And the more it spiraled, the worse they played. This happens in basketball all the time. If you're spiraling, you start to lose your form. It's kind of a mental game with you shooting. I mean, think about it like with kickers in football. They miss one easy kick, and it just kind of, they become terrible after that. Mike Vanderjack. Yesterday, Jemai Mashak, a 75% free throw shooter, missing 2 free throws at the start of the game, finishing 0 of 5 from the free throw line, spiraling. Think about golf. I mean, how often have you heard of players at the top of their game, but some mental thing messes them up, and then they never recover? Tiger Woods. I mean, Tiger Woods was on track to shatter the career record for Majors won, and then the whole scandal breaks with him in 2009 with his ex-wife and all the women that he had on the side, and the humiliation of that leads to him performing horribly for like a solid 10 years. And yeah, there were health issues and things like that, but the other part is his mind just wasn't clear. So I think sometimes we underrate how you can spiral and then you just have a bad performance where you're not efficient. So Timothy McGee says, from what I saw, Houston wasn't playing better. Our shots didn't land. Timothy, I think you're focused on the second 10 minutes of the first half, though. Don't forget that the first 10 minutes of the first half, Houston was in everybody's grill when Tennessee tried to shoot. And Ben says it's what Florida did to us early in the year, 100% the same situation. Ben, you're right. And this was the thing with Florida. Florida was so big and athletic, they could do that. They could come around the screens, they could test every shot. And Tennessee had trouble. Even in the game Tennessee beat Florida, by the way, where they won by 20. Tennessee didn't play that great offensively in that game. Florida was just historically bad on their side of the ball offensively. So I just think that there were a lot of issues. I think Tennessee wanted to turn up the transition game. I think that was the way out of this. That was always the way out of this with Houston, was turn up the tempo, play transition basketball. It was hard to play transition basketball once Juwan Roberts went to the bench. Houston was more athletic. So I think that's the way this ended up playing out. And I think we have to be fair and understand that this is how absolutely Tennessee ended up losing this game. As far as the poll question goes, did Juwan Roberts' foul trouble early actually help Houston? 36% say yes, 64% say no. I think most of you guys, and I understand, I think it was just a bad shooting night, but I think there were some major issues going on throughout. So look, it was a rough way to end the season, no doubt, but it is what it is. Portions of the program are brought to you by Peak IV Hydration in South Knoxville and Sevierville. Live your life to the fullest. Hydrate, rejuvenate, and elevate your health with Peak IV Hydration. Dropping the link in the chat right below. It is time for This Day in Tennessee Sports History. And interestingly enough, this day in Tennessee sports history involves one Rick Barnes. This day in Tennessee sports history brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brake alignment, oil changes, and more. QualityTirePros.com. Walk in and say Off the Hook Sports sent you. Say, hey, Bo, Off the Hook Sports sent you. QualityTirePros.com. On this day in Tennessee sports history, a decade ago today, Tennessee basketball hired Rick Barnes. It was a whirlwind of how things happened. Tennessee had to fire Donnie Tyndall 2 weeks before because of the fact that Donnie Tyndall had an academic fraud investigation. The NCAA was looking into it. Tennessee could only keep him for a year. They fired him, 4 calls, terminated him, and then he got a 10-year show cause from the NCAA. Rick Barnes got fired by Texas the next week, and as Rick Barnes was getting fired by Texas, Dave Hart was reaching out to Rick Barnes to bring him to Tennessee, and it all happened, and Rick Barnes ended up going to Tennessee. And whatever else you want to think about it, and we're going to talk about this later, that was a great hire. Tennessee needed stability. They needed character in their basketball program, for lack of a better term, given the fact that they had fired 2 coaches in 3 years, or 2 of their previous 3 coaches have been fired due to violations. And they needed one who could be a proven consistent winner. Rick Barnes has more than lived up to his expectations as Tennessee basketball's head coach. He just wrapped up his 10th season as head coach of the Vols yesterday, and today is the 10-year anniversary of them hiring. And we're going to talk a little bit about Rick Barnes later in the show. When we come back, though, we're going to look back on the careers of a couple of people, including Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler, and then we're going to talk Bob Kessling, who also came to an end yesterday as the Vols radio broadcaster. But we also have Lady Vols coverage to talk about. and the future with Rick Barnes at Tennessee. So we got a lot to get to today, again, covering a lot of basketball because of what happened over the weekend. And what turned out to be a tough weekend for Tennessee. Bittersweet because they did enjoy their win over Kentucky Friday, but then Saturday and Sunday did not go well for the Lady Vols or the Vols. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. We are live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. Stick with us. We're going to talk about Bob Kessling, Jemai Meshack, Zakai Ziegler, Barnes, and the Lady Vols in 2 minutes. We will be right back.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's your pair.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7 East Tennessee locations.
Welcome back to the program, Off the Hook Sports, brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. Want to share something you need to know? Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, as Dave doesn't let anybody forget. Sorry, just like to mess with him, but he was in the buying process of a car recently, and he's very picky. He wanted a Bronco initially, but he needed someone to walk him through the options. Andy and Nick White had him covered while he was deciding on just what Bronco he wanted to go with. There was no doubt that he was going to leave with a quality vehicle because that's all they carry at Ted Russell Ford Lincoln on Kingston Pike and Parkside Drive. And after one meeting, he left knowing what he should expect for the vehicle or vehicles he wanted. Then it was just a matter of making up his mind. And you know what? He walked away with a Jeep, and a pretty good one too. And you won't believe this. Nick told him if he doesn't hear from him soon enough to call his cell. That's what I call 5-star customer service with no pressure. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln on Kingston Pike and Parkside Drive. If you want to stop at lot after lot and waste precious time, that's an option, but why? Ted Russell Ford Lincoln has perfected the buying process. Again, as far as what car he chose, Dave chose a Jeep, and the good news was he had plenty of time to decide. With Ted Russell Ford Lincoln, he knew that they would have whatever vehicle he decided upon on their lot. After all, they're East Tennessee's #1 volume Ford dealer. Whether it's partnering with local businesses or sending someone home in their first car, Ted Russell Ford Lincoln loves to be a part of special moments in East Tennessee. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln views it as an honor to serve their friends and neighbors. That's why they're so committed to providing exceptional customer service. There's nothing better than driving off in the car of your dreams, and Ted Russell Ford Lincoln believes it's a pleasure to help people do just that every day. Do yourself a favor. If you want a fantastic vehicle at a great place and a smile on your face as you drive off the lot, stop by Ted Russell Ford Lincoln on Kingston Pike and Parkside Drive. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is the exclusive provider and studio sponsor of Off the Hook Sports. All right. Yesterday, Tennessee basketball lost to Kentucky. No, I'm sorry, to Houston. Signified the end of an era for two players. Two players who are very rare this day and age in college basketball. And when I say very rare, I mean they are starters who were 4-year players. Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak. Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak are everything you love about a college basketball player. Mashak was a 4-star, in case you guys forgot, and had to ride the bench a lot his first year. But he stayed at Tennessee because he believed in what Rick Barnes was going to develop him into, which many 4-stars wouldn't do. And in the process, he became one of the best defensive players in the nation this past year. All SEC defense, was named Defensive Player of the Year nationally by one service. Zakai Ziegler was an unrated recruit out of the Bronx, reclassified into the 2021 class and signed with Tennessee as just a late signee that no one thought about and was going to be the backup point, and immediately became the backup point guard to Kennedy Chandler, the 5-star one and done on that team. And people fell in love with Zakai Ziegler more than Chandler in that year, for those who don't forget. Ziegler and Mashak ended up having, by far, the most successful runs in Tennessee basketball history. They were the most successful 4-year players from a team perspective in Tennessee basketball history. So I just want to give you some thoughts on this real quick, guys. Before Ziegler and Mashak got to Knoxville, there had been players for Tennessee achieve 30-win seasons. There had been players for Tennessee get the Vols to a number 1 ranking. There had been players for Tennessee win the SEC tournament title. There had been players for Tennessee win the SEC regular season title. There had been players for Tennessee reach the Elite Eight. Nobody in Tennessee history had done all of those things. Nobody had done all of those things. In their 4 years at Tennessee, with the win over Kentucky on Friday in the Sweet 16, Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak ended up doing all those things. Also, there have been players for Tennessee get the Vols to number 1. This year alone, they accomplished 2 of those things by getting the Vols to number 1, the 3rd time in history Tennessee was at number 1, and also by getting to 30 wins. Most importantly, though, not most importantly, but even more standing out is that nobody at Tennessee had done those things multiple times. Now, Ziegler and Mashak accomplished some of those things only once, but they accomplished one of everything. The things they accomplished once were the number 1 ranking, the 30-win season, the SEC regular season title, which they won last year. They won it outright. And the SEC tournament title, which they won in 2022. What they also accomplished multiple times, though, was getting to the Elite Eight. No one had ever done that multiple times in Tennessee basketball history. They went to 3 straight Sweet 16s. No one's ever made 3 straight in Tennessee basketball history. These are the most accomplished team Vols in history, in the history of the program. And I think it speaks volumes because you can tell that a player like Zakai Ziegler is exactly the type of player that Rick Barnes loves coaching and the type of player that thrives in that system. He's 5'9". He was a 2-time SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He was all SEC and all SEC defense this year and 3rd-team All-American. And I don't know if he'll make it to the NBA because of his size, but nobody plays basketball the right way more than Zakai Ziegler, the way you can appreciate it. And then there was just this moment that I want to show yesterday, guys. Zakai Ziegler and Rick Barnes. This is after the tournament. Just take a look at this real quick.
Good luck. Hey, thank you.
I'm sorry, I had to show that. Zakai Ziegler, I think, immediately has elevated himself as the greatest point guard in Tennessee basketball history. There's no Tennessee basketball starting 5 in history all time that should not include Zakai Ziegler, specifically at the point. And that's crazy to think about because you have Grant Williams. If you do an all-time Tennessee starting five, you got Grant Williams, Chris Lofton, Allen Houston, Bernard Keaton, Dale Ellis, Ernie Grunfeld. It's really hard to put together a top five, particularly since you don't have a true center and you're loaded at certain positions. But if I were going to do an all-time Tennessee starting five, I would have Zakai Ziegler at the point. I would have Chris Lofton at the 2. I would have Bernard King at the 3, obviously. Grant Williams at the 4. The question is who's at the 5, and then it gets a little bit tough because there's no true 5 in Tennessee history that would be on the all-time starting 5. But I think one of the ones you can do is probably Reggie Johnson, who was a true center for Tennessee. He was at 6'9", but it would be a little tough. I will say that Tennessee's never had like a true center. Could be the biggest reason they haven't actually ever won a national title or gone to the Final Four, but that's a different story altogether. But I mean, then you got to throw in Dalton Connect, people like that. Dalton Connect, Dale Ellis, Allen Houston. I mean, they're loaded with elite wings. 2 and 3 guards are loaded with, but Zakai Ziegler is on the all-time starting 5. That's a real standout thing to talk about. Look, Zakai Ziegler, we're not talking enough about everything he went through. If you guys don't remember, his first year at Tennessee, his house where he grew up burned down in a fire. He lost all of his family possessions. Dylan says Ron Slade the 5, since he's a friend of the show. Yeah, at 6'7", maybe. But Zakai Ziegler's lost all of his possessions his freshman year at Tennessee. And Tennessee fans came up to support him and put together a lot of money and support to help him and his family through that period. Rick Barnes is like a father figure to this guy. And remember this too, and I want to point this out about Zakai. This should tell you all you need to know about how he came in with the right mentality from the start. Rick Barnes is a believer of you earn your stripes when it comes to playing time. How do you earn your stripes? You show that you are committed to what he wants to coach. And it usually takes players a year that aren't 5 stars to figure out what he wants to coach, particularly on defense. Zakai Ziegler became a regular contributor his true freshman year as a reclassified, unrated point guard that was a high school age. That's how much Rick Barnes immediately fell in love with Ziegler, and the rest of the program at Tennessee did. Zakai Ziegler, to me, is like the Jawan Jennings of the Vols in basketball, in the sense that he's that type of player that you would want to run through a brick wall for. And then Jemai Mashak developed into that too and fully embraced it. I think Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler deserve massive amounts of praise for what they did. You know, Dave and I talked one day, and we may go into this one day a little further, whether or not Zakai Ziegler's jersey should hang in the rafters. The problem with that is that there's already a number 5 in the rafters, which is Chris Lofton's, who was also beloved and also a guy who overcame certain limitations, particularly being undersized. But if anybody was worthy of also wearing number 5, that guy would probably be Zakai Ziegler. I mean, he's now the all-time leader in assists in the SEC. He was an absolute baller for the Vols. He was the leader of this team. Now, that's no knock on Chaz Lanier, who I think did develop as time goes on into being tough in clutch situations and things like that. I'm not trying to knock that, but when things got tough, they turned to Zakai to get things going, and that never changed. So when you take that into account, Zakai Ziegler, I think, deserves, I mean, he deserves such a place in history that I don't know if he's going to get his due and his props, but this guy is a legend and his era should never be forgotten. Dylan Elam says put them side by side, Zakai and Chris Lofton's jersey. I kind of agree. Just have both number 5s retired. I mean, Lofton's jersey was retired while Zakai Ziegler was playing. That's why Ziegler ended up not doing it. But at this point, I think it's totally rational to put both of their jerseys side by side. I think they're just two of the greatest people to play at Tennessee. And Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak together, their legacies are untouched. They have done a lot for this program, and I don't think we should forget that. They are not the only people, though, whose eras came to an end with the Tennessee Vols on Sunday in their last And Gene Galt says Marcus Hayslip is our all-time center. That's actually a good one. In terms of raw talent, you would be right, but I can't sit there and say he achieved enough to be the all-time center. But if we're going by talent, that's not my all-time starting five anyway. If we're going just by talent for Tennessee for all-time starting five, like not production, but again, specifically talent, we're having a different all-time starting five. Because we're having Bernard King, Dale Ellis, Allen Houston. I mean, Chris Lofton wouldn't even be in the all-time talent-wise starting five because it'd be Bernard King, Dale Ellis, Allen Houston at the 3, Allen Houston at the 2, Dale Ellis at the 3, Bernard King at the 4, and then probably Reggie Johnson would be at the 5, Johnson or Hayslip, and then I don't know who you would have at the 1, but maybe Ernie Grunfeld because he can play the 1 if he needs to. He did that some at Tennessee. So production matters more than just the talent that you display at any given time. Quick message from, and David Speaks is right, Tobias Harris. But again, production at Tennessee, Tobias Harris is just not, that he didn't produce at Tennessee. He was there 1 year and was bounced out of in the NCAA tournament. All right, quick message, guys, from Ted Russell Ford. And when we come back, we're going to talk about another person whose era came to an end yesterday.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American made. Ted Russell Ford is East Tennessee's #1 volume Ford dealer. Save up to $4,350 on a new Ford F-150 XLT or get into a new Ford Ranger XLT with no payments for 90 days. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or...
All right, welcome back to the program, and let's talk a little bit about Bob Kessling. And we're going to play a little hot or cold with this. Bob Kessling's era came to an end yesterday, covering Tennessee Vols. For those who don't remember, Kessling took over for John Ward in 1999. John Ward's final season as the voice of the Vols, the most legendary voice of the Vols, by the way, known for Give Him Six, Touchdown Big Orange, It's Football Time in Tennessee. We know John Ward's history of calling games. His last year was Tennessee winning the national championship, and his last call for Tennessee football was the national champion is clad in Big Orange. And then his last basketball game, unfortunately, was to watch Tennessee lose to Southwest Missouri State by 30. So Jerry Green did not send John Ward off right. Bob Kessling gets the job after that, 99, and he immediately takes over for football and basketball, and Burt Bertelkamp becomes the color commentator that year. It's Kessling's and Bertelkamp's last year. Yesterday was their last game calling games, both of them. And it was a 25-year run. And I have to say that it was a memorable 25 years. Actually, it was 26 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. It was actually right at 26 seasons and of Bob Kessling covering football and men's basketball. And Burt Bertelkamp is specific with basketball, but to see Bob Kessling's era come to an end is for a lot of people the end of their childhood, the end of them growing up. I mean, when I was young, actually, this was before the SEC got all of its TV deals. Even in Memphis, there were sometimes I couldn't catch Tennessee games on TV, and I listened to Kessling calling it. And I just have to say that was a fun time, and Burt Bertelkamp was a lot of fun too. So we're going to play hot or cold. We're going to talk about basketball and football here. And we're going to look at what were the candidates for the most memorable game Bob Kessling ever called at Tennessee. So hot or cold right now, brought to you by City Heating and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters, cityheatandair.com. Let's get rolling. All right. We're going to start with football. Bob Kessling called the 2001 Florida game, in which Tennessee beat second-ranked Florida 34-32. Kessling finishes that game by saying, quote, "Hallelujah, the Volunteers have won in Gainesville." Tennessee had not beaten Florida in 30 years in Gainesville at that point. By the way, they're almost approaching another 30 years and having not beaten Florida in Gainesville since 2003, if we're going there. But still, they hadn't beaten them in 30 years to that point, and then they beat them that year and went 34-32. Very bittersweet game because after getting up to number 2 and getting ready to play for a national title, they lose to a 3-loss LSU team the next week in the SEC championship game. so they don't go to the national title. But that game itself was extremely memorable. 2003 Miami. Bob Kessling goes to Miami. Tennessee goes to Miami, shocks Miami as a 12-point underdog, wins 10-6, and what Dave and I both agree is the best coach game ever by Philip Fulmer. And I'm not saying that to disparage Philip Fulmer. That was an incredibly coached game because I'm sorry, Miami was a much better team than Tennessee that year. They have much more talent, and Fulmer just coached circles around Larry Coker in that game. One of the greatest fourth down calls ever, the end around to Derek Tinsley. 2016 Georgia, the Dobbs nail boot game instead of the hobnail boot game. The Josh Dobbs Hail Mary to Jawan Jennings to win, which is, as we all now agree, the peak of, you don't want to say this, but was the peak of the Butch Jones career at Tennessee. That got Tennessee to 5-0 at the time. They seemed like they were finally where they needed to be as a program because they'd gone 9-4 the year before, winning their final 6 games, and then they were 5-0 here. They were on an 11-game winning streak, the longest winning streak in college football. They had beaten back-to-back top 25 teams, Florida and Georgia. They looked like they were ready to roll, and then they lost 3 straight. So similar to the Florida game, 2001, very bittersweet. But hey, that moment was peak for them. And yes, Dylan Elam says that Dobbs receives it, and it is caught. That was Vern who said it that way, though, wasn't it? I could be wrong on that. And then finally, the fourth one was the 2022 Alabama game, where Tennessee storms the field, ends a 15-year losing streak to Alabama. Actually, a losing streak of 15 straight games to Alabama. Beats them for the first time since 2006 off a last-second field goal by Chase McGrath, Hendon Hooker, and the 15-second drive. That's still so underrated that he led Tennessee on a 15-second drive to get Tennessee a 52-49 win. So first I'm going to say this, and we're going to get to basketball. But first, poll question, what was the most memorable football game Bob Kessling called? And we're going to say 2001 at Florida, 2003 at Miami, 2016 at Georgia. Kessling had quite a few good calls on the road, didn't he? Or 2022 versus Alabama. In the moment, I think the Florida game of 2001 was the biggest one. As far as the entertainment value, I say 2016 at Georgia. But as far as like which one is looked back on most fondly, it is 2022 versus Alabama. I mean, that was such a moment of jubilation for a Tennessee program that had suffered so much frustration for so many years. And I'm not trying to knock the loss at Miami, the win at Miami. That was a big one too. But that Miami team, Miami gave it away in a lot of ways. It was kind of a fluky upset. The other ones were just incredible games all the way around. So I'm going to lead with, I'm going to say of those memorable ones, I'm actually going to go 2022 Alabama because it had the excitement. It didn't have the upset value. Florida and Miami had the upset value. Tennessee was 18-point underdogs at Florida. They were 12-point underdogs at Miami. They were 9-point underdogs against Alabama. But at home, I mean, you saw 2 members of College Game Day pick Tennessee to win that game. Corso and Pat McAfee called for Tennessee to win that game. I think Tennessee, though, I think the hype behind the Alabama game and just everything you felt the program was back after decades of frustration. I think that signified so much, and that's why that game was so memorable. Beating Alabama just meant so much to the program at the time. And I think now you guys on the message board, tell me, did I leave out a game that was better? Now, as far as dramatic call, we are right. I don't think it's a close dramatic call. The most dramatic call was the Georgia game, the Tennessee Georgia game. So General Ursa says underrated game of the Kessling era is the 2004 Georgia game. Tennessee ended a 4-game losing streak. No, you were right, General Ursa. And funny enough about that Georgia game, I feel like Tennessee fans forget about it a lot, but that was the 3rd straight game they had won when double-digit underdogs on the road. 2001 Florida and 2003 Miami being the other two. They had lost to Auburn 34-10 the week before. They hadn't beaten Georgia in 4 years. They had a true freshman quarterback. And Kevin Burnett, after a loss to Auburn, says, we will see them again, implying we will see them again in the SEC title game the week before they're playing Georgia, meaning guaranteeing they're going to beat Georgia. When Georgia has its best team ever to that point under Mark Richt, having won the SEC title in 2002, played for it in 2003. David Green is a senior. David Pollock's a senior. Fred Davis is a senior. And Tennessee is rebuilding, supposedly, with 2 true freshman quarterbacks. And they go to Athens and face the Georgia team they haven't beaten in 4 years. And they beat them not handily. They won 19-14, but they controlled the game most of the time. Very underrated game. So I do actually agree with you that. And David Speaks also says 2005 LSU comeback was big too. You're right. The 2005 LSU comeback, it's got a little bit of 2001 Florida vibes, but on a much more extreme scale because it's so bittersweet how it happened, because it is the one bright spot in a horrifically bad season for Tennessee. 2002 Arkansas was another classic. Yeah, if I'm doing second tier, I'm giving you 2002 Arkansas, 2005 LSU, 2003 Alabama, by the way, 2004 Georgia, 2016 Florida was memorable. Dylan asked about that. But I just think those 4 guys that I named, I mean, the win over Alabama in 2022 and the win over Florida in 2001, those were like the peak. That was when Tennessee circled those games more than any other, and they won those games. So you have to give those as the biggest wins over those 2 teams that Kessling called. The Miami one was just, if you guys remember, Miami was such an imposing brand at that time. So going down there to win was a huge deal. And then the Georgia game was just the crazy wildness of how that game played out. That's why I put that one on there. I don't think there's any question that I picked the most memorable win against each of their rivals, Florida and Georgia and Alabama, in those calls. And then and then the Miami game was just a special situation. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the most memorable basketball wins in a second. But first, a quick message from, as we're still playing hot or cold, City Heating and Air Conditioning. I guess I should say that I'm hot on I'm hot on Florida being a candidate. I'm hot on Georgia being a candidate, and I'm hot on Alabama being a candidate for the greatest one. I'm not hot on Miami, but it is one of his 4 best calls. Again, hot or cold, and then as far as candidates, others that people mention, Georgia 2004, LSU 2005, Arkansas 2002, Florida 2016, Alabama 2003. I mentioned them. All great wins, all memorable wins. I'm cold on any of them being considered Bob Kessling's best call. I mean, I could say Alabama in 99 too on that, and Notre Dame in 99. All right, hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. In a second, we're going to talk about some of the memorable basketball wins.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. Dare to compare.
All right, welcome back to the program, playing a little hot or cold on the memorable games that Bob Kessling has called. I talked a little bit of the football ones. You guys vote on the poll. Is the most memorable football game he called 2001 Florida, 2003 Miami, 2016 Georgia, 2022 Alabama? The next question, can any basketball games compete with that? I think there are 3 games that Bob Kessling called that stand out above all others in basketball. You guys tell me if there's one you prefer. I think 2008 at Memphis stands out above all others. Beating Memphis in 2008, it was a regular season game, number 2 versus number 1 matchup. Tennessee goes to Memphis. The college basketball world stopped for that game. So many factors in there, by the way. Not just 2008, not just number 2 versus number 1. Not just in-state Tennessee versus Memphis. But also, and we're forgetting about this, Bruce Pearl versus John Calipari. The 2 greatest coaches ever at playing to the media. No one plays to the media better than those 2. No one promotes their programs better than those 2. So you had everything in that game. Okay, I still maintain that's the greatest win in Tennessee basketball history. A couple other ones that compete, though, and you guys can come at me if you have any other better ones that outside of the ones I'm naming, but I think 2010 Ohio State in the Sweet 16 when Tennessee upset Ohio State to get to its first Elite 8 ever in history. J.P. Prince blocks a game-tying 3 by Evan Turner for the Vols to win in the Sweet 16. They go to their first Elite 8 ever under Bruce Pearl. That was a huge one. And the other one I have is 2019 Gonzaga in basketball. You guys let me know if I'm missing any. What's your favorites between those? Or if there's another basketball game that was better. And if any of them compete with any of those football wins I named. I mean, football is king. Football drives everything. But you let me know. Hurry up and vote on the poll question because I'm about to take it down. But first, what was the most memorable football game Bob Kessling called? 2001 at Florida? No one is picking that. 6% say 2003 at Miami. 18% say 2016 at Georgia, 76% say 2022 versus Alabama. My guess is many of the Alabama people would have said 2001 at Florida second, but because Alabama was the option, that's why Florida has no vote. So I'm killing that poll question, and here we go with this one. What is the most memorable basketball game that Bob Kessling called? And we're going to say 2008 at Memphis, 2010 versus Ohio State, 2019 versus Gonzaga. And on this one, we're going to go other. And you guys let me know with other on that. I'm going 2008 at Memphis. I'm going to take it out another notch, and I'm going to say that 2008 Memphis rivals some of Tennessee's biggest football wins with how exciting that was. General Ursa says says the SEC Tournament Championship. Yes, the SEC Tournament Championship, that was a big one, but I actually think the win over Kentucky the day before was the big one in that one. If you're talking about 2022, that's a really standout one, the SEC Tournament title. Now, as far as other games that you could talk about, one that really stands out is the arrival game for Tennessee under Bruce Pearl. Ironically, was a blowout win at Texas and Rick Barnes. That stands out. Another underrated one is when they beat Florida at home that year when Florida was undefeated. That was Billy Donovan's Florida team that won its first national title. Oh, by the way, then they went to Florida and won. They swept the Florida team that won the national title that year. That was very memorable. Beating Florida at home the next year was very memorable for them, and getting back to the Sweet 16. Sweeping Florida in basketball in 2000 under Jerry Green was memorable to that during that regular season to capture the SEC regular season title. Wins at Rupp Arena in 1999, 2005. It was like a 47-46 win at Rupp in 99 when Kentucky was defending national champions. Sweeping Kentucky in 2018 in the regular season stands out. Getting to the Elite Eight in 2024 and 2025 stand out, capturing the SEC regular season title. Lots of big wins for Rick Barnes at Tennessee, but I think these three stand out the most. So I'm hot, so I'm cold on Ohio State 2010, cold on 2019 Gonzaga, cold on other, because I think the only one that really, I don't think there's anything that competes with the 2008 one at Memphis, and I think 2008 Memphis actually competes with some of Tennessee football's best wins. So the poll question: what is the most memorable basketball game that Bob Kessling called? 2008 at Memphis, 2010 versus Ohio State, 2019 versus Gonzaga, and other at 0%. Portions of the program brought to you by Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com. HDKnoxville.com. We're going to talk a little bit about the results of that poll question when we get back, but stick with us first because we got to take another 2-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Lady Vols and Rick Barnes. Stick with us. We'll be back 2 minutes.
It's a new year, a new day, and Ted Russell Lincoln has an exciting new offer to share. Right now, get a 2024 Lincoln Navigator with 0% APR for 72 months and up to $4,000 in bonus cash. Or drive away in a new 2024 Lincoln Corsair Grand Touring with 0% APR for 60 months and up to $4,500 in bonus cash. It's time to get excited about the ride. Come and see what a luxury car experience truly is at Ted Russell Lincoln Knoxville.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire.
Welcome back to the program. Off the Hook Sports. I am Caleb Calhoun. The show brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, BanksandJones.com, live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. The results of that poll question, what is the most memorable basketball game that Bob Kessling called? 2008 at Memphis leads with 56% of the vote. 2020 in Ohio State at 22%. 2019 Gonzaga at 11%, and other at 11%. It is time for the stat of the day. The stat of the day brought to you by Work Trucks. We're all about trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle. Now, time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down. It has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process is also quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for Work Trucks, cargo vans, utility body trucks with the nap hide work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Trucks supplies vehicles to people just like you and get you back on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks, and that's a fact. Service industry, remember Work Trucks. Work Trucks carries the trucks that your businesses has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville and in downtown Birmingham. For the entire inventory, go online to worktrucksllc.com. Worktrucksllc.com with an X. Why risk chancing your future and business on the wrong piece of equipment that burns your time? Worktrucksllc.com. Work Trucks will also make sure Work Trucks will also make sure you have the perfect vehicle you have to have. They'll even find a perfect truck, outfit it, and make sure it fits your needs to a T. Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. WorkTrucksLLC.com. Proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. The stat of the day is a shout out to Zakai Ziegler, who over the weekend, and guys, I'm going to be giving shout outs to Zakai Ziegler and Jermaine Wayshak all week for stat of the day. So I'm sorry, that's just what I'm going to do because I think they deserve all the love and the props that you could possibly give them. Zakai Ziegler on Friday became the SEC record holder for assist in a single season with a double-double against Kentucky. And for his career, now Zakai Ziegler is Tennessee's all-time leader in assist. As for his career, he finished with a total of 747. And he had 161, 218, and 275 his sophomore, junior, and senior years. All of those led the SEC at the time. 275 this past year was an SEC record. Major shout out to Zakai Ziegler. That is the stat of the day. All right. Sticking with men's basketball. As Steve Sullivan said, we are here to the best way you could talk about this is to toss some dirt on the season and move on to football. Steve, you're right, but we have to toss dirt on the season, and that's what this show is about. Today's show is about tossing dirt on the season. So the question now becomes Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes' Final Four drought has now extended to 22 years, loses another time in the NCAA Tournament Elite Eight. This time, playing horrible doing it. Another offensive collapse by a Rick Barnes team in the NCAA Tournament. Is begging the question, is Rick Barnes too old school? And will he hold Tennessee back? And many people are blaming him and his history for that. I understand there's frustration about Rick Barnes not going further. I'm going to play the other side because I believe it. And I'm going to say this as nice as I can. I think Tennessee basketball fans who want to move on from Rick Barnes need to back the heck off and appreciate what they have. I get the frustration with Bruce Pearl being in his second Final Four in 6 years when Bruce Pearl was at Tennessee and would have stayed at Tennessee. But Bruce Pearl at Auburn, by the way, has already gotten caught cheating once and had the program on probation and got an NCAA violation at Tennessee. Tennessee's never had an NCAA violation under Rick Barnes. On top of that, Rick Barnes is far and away the most successful coach in Tennessee basketball history. There's no question that he's the greatest coach in Tennessee basketball history, even greater than Bruce Pearl at Tennessee. And finally, one of the things I'm going to ask you is, guys, if you lose Rick Barnes, who are you going to get? Be careful what you wish for. There's this concept that everybody's having in basketball right now that's like, oh, spacing matters and tempo matters and shooting threes all day matters. And maybe that's what's good for your program. And maybe that's what the Lady Vols need to run with Kim Caldwell, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because that is what they're running. But if everybody's running it, then you're not going to be anything special. Rick Barnes has a unique style that is conducive to him and conducive to what he can do, that allows him to develop players and allows him to get a certain type of player and allows Tennessee to remain consistent. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I'm going to defend Rick Barnes heavily on this for a couple of reasons. Guys, Rick Barnes this year had to change up his style of play completely in the middle of the season because a player that he was developing, JP Estrella, suffered a season-ending injury in November in the post. That cost Tennessee yesterday against Houston. This was a shortcoming of Tennessee's all year. The shortcoming existed because Rick Barnes' key player to address it got hurt. The other inside-out player that would have been an elite scorer for the Vols, particularly for the wing, Darlington Dubar, never really came on because Darlington Dubar suffered multiple family issues before the start of the season and was hurt and can never really get right from that. Nobody's fault. And then there was Cameron Carr, who in the middle of December, a wing that Rick Barnes had built everything around as the elite wing defender coming off the bench that pushed people like Freddie DeLeon to the transfer portal. Cameron Carr goes and hits the transfer portal. Middle of December to go to Baylor. Guys, Rick Barnes didn't get JP Estrella hurt, and that's what cost Tennessee against Houston yesterday. That just happened, okay? Bad breaks happen. He still got Tennessee to its second straight Elite Eight, and for everybody who forgot, Tennessee was an underdog in yesterday's game. The year before, Tennessee goes to the Elite Eight and just gets a bad draw playing Purdue. And by the way, you can't account for this. Rick Barnes had the team to beat Purdue, and he coached them well. The only reason they didn't beat Purdue was because Jonas Adu took himself out of the game because he was so mentally soft. He let himself get wrecked by Zach Edey. No one could have seen Jonas Adu being that soft until it was in the moment. You never know when a player is soft like that until in the moment. You can't measure the intangibles until you see it under the lights. And yeah, Jonas Adu panicked and quit. And it was pathetic. And it was one of the most pathetic scenes I'd ever seen. Zach Edey was playing air. Okay? Jonas Adu was never going to win that matchup, but he could have not lost it the way he did. I don't think Rick Barnes accounted for Jonas Adu doing that. No coach could. He's got Tennessee in back-to-back Elite Eights. He's got them in 3 straight Sweet 16s. You know, before the Sweet 16 3 years ago, Rick Barnes had the reputation of second-round Rick. Before last year, he was considered an underachiever in the NCAA tournament because every time he had been eliminated at Tennessee, he had lost to a lower seed. Well, guess what? The last 2 years, he was not eliminated by a lower seed. He was eliminated by the number 1 seed in his bracket in the Elite Eight. He's taken Tennessee to an SEC regular season title. If he can't coach in the tournament, he's gotten him to Sunday on the tournament 4 separate occasions and won the SEC tournament title. Oh, and by the way, and I really want to point this out, Rick Barnes is built to actually be better now than he was at 51 or at 61. That's why I always say he's 70 going on 51. Because the transfer portal favors Rick Barnes. What did Rick Barnes in at Texas is he would coach players well, he would develop them, and he would try to mix in a 5-star, get involved in the one-and-done game that could be the sizzle needed to go win a title. The problem is 5-star one-and-dones don't work well under Rick Barnes. And he tried it at Tennessee a few times too with Kennedy Chandler, Keon Johnson. My mind is drawing a blank, but you guys know who I'm talking about. The other 5-star in the 2020-2021 class. He had 2 5-stars in that class. And then he had, obviously, Kennedy Chandler in the 2022 class. 5-star one-and-dones don't work under Rick Barnes because 5-star one-and-dones aren't going to college to be developed. It's a pit stop for the NBA, and half the time they're wondering why they're in college. Rick Barnes is not going to change his coaching principles for a 5-star one-and-done. But in the era of the transfer portal, it's different because you can get somebody as valuable as a 5-star one and done. And that person as valuable is a guy who hadn't grown into his body yet coming out of high school. So he went to college at a smaller school and he's dominating at that college. And then he transfers to the bigger school looking to fine tune the last part of his game to try to make a run at the NBA draft. Those players will always buy into Rick Barnes' system as one and done because they know this is their last shot. That's how you get the Dalton Connect, who transferred to Tennessee because he wanted to develop defensively. That's how you get the Chaz Lanier, who transferred to Tennessee because he wanted to develop more versatility in a scoring game. Both of them fully bought in. You're going to see more of those. Remember, after the Elite Eight last year, Rick Barnes was 69, just had arguably the greatest single season in Tennessee basketball history from a player in Dalton Connect, and that was the first time he got them to the Elite Eight. And what did we hear? We heard, oh, that's it. Rick Barnes has to retire. You're not going to get another Dalton Connect next year. Well, spoiler alert, he didn't get another Dalton Connect, but he got a Chaz Lanier, and he had two veterans, Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak, and he went back to the Elite Eight, and he went back to the Elite Eight despite the fact that one of the post players he was trying to build his team around suffered a season-ending injury. A wing he was trying to make an integral part of the rotation ended up transferring midseason, and another elite scoring wing who he tried to help who he brought in to try to recreate somewhat of Dalton Connect's production never lived up to it. Not his fault, had personal issues, but that's just how it happened. And he still got this team to the Elite Eight. What more do you want from this guy, guys? Honestly. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous for people to think that Rick Barnes would ever deserve to or need to retire or need to be replaced at Tennessee. Okay? Let's talk about the future for a minute. There looks like there's a rebuild now with Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Mashak being gone. Chaz Lanier and Igor Milicic and Jordan Gainey being gone, guys. Rick Barnes is going to replace those guys, okay? He's going to go the transfer portal route. Lanier and Igor were transfer portals guys. As a matter of fact, 3 of the starting 5 were transfer portal guys this year, okay? So who does he have back? All right, 4-year guys and Mashak and Ziegler are big losses. But guess what? He's got Felix Ampera back. He's got Kate Phillips back, who's only going to develop and get better, by the way. Bishop Boswell, as a freshman, should take a huge leap into next year, okay? I think you're real. And then JP Estrella is going to be back. So he's going to have 4 guys that'll be part of the rotation next year that were on the team this year and are experienced in the system and are developing under Rick Barnes. And you guys are questioning if he should go. And if you already have 4 guys, why can't he go the transfer portal route to get the other players he wants? Okay. Now, Zakai Ziegler is irreplaceable. So the hope is that a Troy Henderson develops into him, and that's going to take a couple of years to get even close to what Ziegler can do. So maybe he won't have the year next year that he had this past year. But I think he's done when he's maybe 2 years away from being as good, given the personnel that he could go for. I think is ridiculous. And I think the idea of wanting to move on from Rick Barnes is insane. Again, tell me, what are you going to get? What are you going to get? Oh, you want Nate Oates at Alabama? Well, guess how many Final Fours Nate Oates has made at Alabama? 0. A big fat goose egg. He relies on the 3 so much, and against Duke, that cost them. And my brother and I were talking, funny enough, over the weekend. If BYU knew how to come across screens and break through them the right way, they might have given Alabama trouble from 3. The entire Alabama team is relying on whether or not they're hitting their 3s in the NCAA tournament. So if they have a poor shooting game, they lose. Now, yes, you can bring up Tennessee's poor shooting game on a Sunday, but again, JP Estrella being hurt throughout the year, this was not the offense Barnes planned to run. So let's stop talking for a minute about the fact that Rick Barnes should ever be let go. I mean, I'm sorry, that's an insane. I'm sorry, you're right. Alabama didn't make the Final Four last year. So they have made 1 Final Four, excuse me. They got 0 national titles, is what I meant to say. They do have 0 national titles. And last year's Final Four run was, again, flukish. Alabama wasn't that good in the regular season, guys. They finished 25-12. They got a lucky draw. I mean, they got a lucky draw. They did beat a North Carolina team that turned out to be overrated this year, but they beat Charleston, Grand Canyon, and Clemson to get there. So Alabama, again, under Nate Oates, just got blown out by Duke in the Elite Eight. And the reason they got blown out by Duke in the Elite Eight had everything to do with the fact that they rely solely on whether or not they're going to shoot their 3s. But Nate Oates doesn't have any national title. He keeps winning. But, I mean, again, and he's also had his own, we know about the personal issues. So I'm sorry. I got to be honest with you. Alabama, Nate Oates, I don't know why you guys think he would be better than Rick Barnes, particularly in this era. I'm actually higher on Rick Barnes. So I'm just going to ask the poll question on this, guys. What do you hope Rick Barnes does? What is Tennessee's future under Rick Barnes? Is Tennessee's future like under Rick Barnes? They'll never get past the Elite Eight, or best chance at a national title. I think Rick Barnes is your best shot at a national title. And yeah, I'm dead serious. Best shot at a national title. Okay. This era is conducive to Rick Barnes. We're seeing this. Remember, he was second round Rick. He got fired for Texas. He had gone 10 straight years without making the second round, or without getting past the second round, excuse me. And then with Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield, finally gets back to the Sweet 16, goes the one and done route again for a couple of years, gets bounced out in the first round or second round. He has ditched the one and done freshman guys. He has totally ditched the one and done 5 stars. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. What's happened since he's been ditching the one and done 5 stars? Sweet 16, Elite 8, Elite 8. His best 3-year run, by the way, since the early 2000s when he was at Texas. He's all of a sudden had a renaissance of his own career because he's countering the one and done process with the transfer portal process, and he's still not going anywhere. Rick Barnes, you guys wanting him gone need to back the heck off, okay? Because you don't know what you can get if you get rid of Rick Barnes. You could get something worse. This is why the SEC has had issues in football recently. They have been getting rid of good coaches in search of the next Nick Saban. It has been proven costly time and time again. Back off, Rick Barnes. He has done a heck of a job at Tennessee. He's far and away the best coach in Tennessee basketball history. And also, just from a character point of view, I don't know if you care about this, but you can have a lot of pride in what he does at Tennessee, okay? A guy like Rick Barnes is what makes you fall in love with the guys that like Zakai Ziegler, because Rick Barnes gets those type of guys, okay? So unless you think you can go get a coach who will win you national championships year in and year out, which you can't, you need to stick with Rick. And I think people need to be a lot more fair to how things have gone under Rick Barnes. Portions of the program are brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry at Tennessee Tradition, rickterryjewelry.com. Also by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook, the best sports memorabilia, daily updates. Facebook.com/sports treasures TN, Facebook.com/sports treasures TN. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Lady Vols, and I'm staying positive on the future of programs at Tennessee, even though the Lady Vols got bounced out in the Sweet 16. So stick with us 2 minutes. Women's basketball coming up next.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American-made. Ted Russell Ford is East Tennessee's #1 volume Ford dealer. Save up to $4,350 on a new Ford F-150 XLT, or get into a new Ford Ranger XLT with no payments for 90 days. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire.
Welcome back to the program. Portions of the program brought to you by the UPS store, Hardin Valley, helping individuals and small businesses, wide range of products and services, locally owned and operated. 10629 Hardin Valley Road, the UPS store. I'm Caleb Calhoun with Off the Hook Sports. We're going to talk a little bit of women's basketball. Before Tennessee men lost to Houston on Sunday, but after they beat Kentucky on Saturday, Tennessee suffered a tough loss. I'm sorry, after they beat Kentucky on Friday, Tennessee Lady Vols suffered a tough loss on Saturday. So you went from the highs of the men reaching the Elite Eight on Friday to then the Lady Vols losing on Saturday and then the men losing on Sunday. It kind of went from high to low pretty quickly. Kim Caldwell's team, the 5 seed that was ranked number 20 in both polls, lost to Texas 67-59. We thought they had a legitimate chance of beating Texas, because they had lost to Texas by 4 on the road earlier in the year. Texas was the top seed. But that game was at Texas, and Kim Caldwell didn't even coach that game because that was when she was giving birth. So with Kim Caldwell back on the sidelines and this game in Birmingham, which was going to naturally lead to more Lady Vol fans being at the game, and there were, so kind of a home court advantage for them, there seemed to be a great chance Tennessee could win this game. And indeed, they did lead in the fourth quarter, and the game was tied going into the fourth. Unfortunately for Tennessee, and this was an issue for them all year, they picked a really bad time to have a bad shooting game from 3. This was them just shooting poorly. They were 5 of 26 from the three-point line, 4 of 10 from the free throw line, and they live and die off the turnovers in transition, and they only forced 14 turnovers and only had 6 steals. So unless they were going to hit their threes, they weren't going to win this game. This was the risk Kim Caldwell took when she took over Tennessee. The Lady Vols, when she got there, were constructed to be a half-court inside-out team, and Kim Caldwell wants to run tempo. Here's what Kim Caldwell wants to do. Play controlled chaos, Nolan Richardson style for 40 minutes on defense. Force turnovers, completely press out every made basket, do everything you can to turn up the tempo. Then, on top of that, when they get up the court in transition, shoot the 3 when it's open. At Marshall, she did that by getting a bunch of three-point shooters. And that's how she was winning, by the way, at her lower level. She was at Marshall for a year and got to the NCAA tournament that year. But before she was at Marshall, she was at Glenville State, a Division II school, and that's how she won a Division II national championship, made it to a Final Four, and just consistently was winning conference titles every year. The problem was when she got to Tennessee, and she was asked this by John Adams last year in her introductory press conference, can her style translate? And she said, quote, "I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it could." Now, here's the real point, though. To translate it, she had to add size to her shooting and her athleticism with her players. She was limited on what she could do in the transfer portal route because of just her first year at Tennessee and it not being a brand. So what did she do? She went and sacrificed shooting for the size. And her gamble, bank on it, because we're going to bank on it talking about Kim Caldwell's future. Her gamble was the size and the athleticism will allow Tennessee to play her style for the most part. The shooting may or may not be there, but she banked on the idea that the players will shoot much better than they were in previous years because by running the transition, they'll get more open looks. That happened, and it worked in their favor as Tennessee set an SEC record for three-pointers made this year, even though they weren't even in the top 100 of three-point percentage because they took so many. And it got them to the Sweet 16. But the next step for Kim Caldwell was always, when her team can't play transition, can't force those turnovers, does she have shooters that can hit those shots? And if they're not hitting their shots, they're not going to win. And they're susceptible to cold shooting games because these aren't pure sharpshooters. And this time, they had a cold shooting game. So by not being able to force the turnovers and by shooting poorly from 3, they were naturally going to lose. Now, here's the good news for Tennessee. This was a massive overachievement to get to the Sweet 16. And what she did was incredible. And now the Lady Vols have the #1 recruiting class for next year. Far and away the best recruiting class in basketball for next year, guys. Okay. They have the Paulden twins coming in next year. Okay. Which is Paldo twins, excuse me. Mia Paldo and Maya Paldo. 5-star and 4-star. You have Jada Civil, Lauren Hurst, a wing, Jada Civil, a guard, and Denia Prowl, a wing. Denia Prowl's a 5-star too. Apollo and Prawl are both sharpshooters, and they will have the size to, and Prawl will have the size to run this system. Sybil's another sharpshooter. Hurst is another wing at 6'2". She's going to develop some, but she has the size at 6'2", and Maya Paldo also is a good shooter. So she's going for more shooters on the recruiting trail. So next year, she will have elite sharpshooters that are still athletic and the size to run this system. So bank on it. Kim Caldwell will have a national title caliber team every year from here on out as head coach of the Lady Vols. Bank on it.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life.
That's right. Bank on it. Brought to you by Commercial Bank, member FDIC. Life made better. The Lady Vols will be national title contenders every single year for the rest of Kim Caldwell's prime of her career, given what she's building. So I'm going to say this. What was more impressive? Lady Vols making Sweet 16 or men making Elite 8? And then we'll say Lady Vols Sweet 16, Men's Vols Elite 8. You guys vote on that. I think a lot of people are going to say Lady Vols Sweet 16. But who would you say has a better future after that, Rick Barnes or Kim Caldwell? I will say this. I think Kim Caldwell has a better future than Rick Barnes, largely because the Lady Vols are a better program. So it's just easier to recruit and be elite. I think Kim Caldwell did an incredible job her first year. And I think once she gets this recruiting class in, guys, this is going to be incredible. This is going to be a scary team to watch. Again, the only thing they need is more consistent shooting. If she can keep the size to turn up the tempo and still have elite shooting, Kim Caldwell's got a potential dynasty on her hands. And it is a complete departure, funny enough, ironically, from the Pat Summitt era. Because Pat Summitt's era was about defense and rebounding. That's what Kelly Harper ran. That's what Holly Warlick ran. It wasn't working anymore. Tennessee had fallen. They had slipped in recruiting those type of players to South Carolina, so they had to switch it up. UConn has obviously always been more guard-oriented with Gina Auriemma. Kim Caldwell decided, let's play tempo. And she's determining she's going to play tempo better than anybody else in women's college basketball, guys. It's going to be incredible to watch. I think Kim Caldwell, unlike everybody else, just making the Sweet 16 was incredible. And the recruits she has coming in are going to be more impressive. And she may not be done with the transfer portal route. Kim Caldwell clearly had standards to try to make the Sweet 16 this year. Tennessee got back there. Again, Tennessee hasn't gotten past the Sweet 16 since 2016, ironically. So there's really nothing to be ashamed of with that. I think Kim Caldwell did everything she needs to do for this game. So the question, what's more impressive, Lady Vols making Sweet 16 or men making Elite 8? 86% say the Lady Vols making the Sweet 16. And 14% say the men's Vols making the Elite 8. Wow, I didn't think it was going to be that. There was going to be that much of a disparity, but I guess that kind of makes sense. So yeah, the Lady Vols have done an incredible job. That Sweet 16 run was very impressive. So the way it looks next year, I think Mia Paldo, is going to probably immediately start a point guard for the Lady Vols. She's that good. And Denia Prowl is probably going to immediately start on the wing for the Lady Vols. You're going to see those two start immediately next year. Luckily, Kim Caldwell's system is not that complex. It's just relying on athleticism and shooting the ball and playing massively up tempo. So when you take that into account, I mean, I fail to see any way that this team won't be back next year. On top of that, their best player, Talaysia Cooper, also back. She's only a sophomore. Major credit to her. Jewel Spear is gone. She's going to be missed. Jewel Spear was the sharpshooter for this team as a three-point shooter. But you would expect Talaysia Cooper to be better, and Talaysia Cooper can be the athletic transition player and the scoring punch off the bench again if necessary. Beyond that, Z Spearman, the post player, she's got another year left. She's very athletic at 6'4", has incredible size. She should be back. Very key player. We're talking Ruby Whitehorn also should be back as a guard. very key player on this. Samara Spencer is a senior and gone. So really, of the five leading scorers, all they should lose is Jewel Spear and Samara Spencer. And Tess Darby will also be gone too, who was a senior, along with Sarah Puckett. So but those were role players off the bench. I'm telling you guys right now, this team's going to end up being better than it was last year, significantly so. Also, Jillian Hollingshead, I have a lot of respect for Hollingshead, but she just didn't fit this style of play, to be honest with you. So, but the key players that are back are Talisha Cooper, Z Spearman, Ruby Whitehorn. All three are back, which is a really, really, really big deal. Jewel Spear and Samara Spencer being gone is going to hurt. But if those three are back and you get your recruiting class with the Paldo twins and Prowl, Mia Paldo and Denia Prowl able to start immediately, there's your five, and you at least can go 7 deep at that point. And you would expect some of these other players to kind of emerge. Alyssa Latham being part of it. Kanaya Boyd, who was a freshman, taking a step forward. She's going to go the transfer route to Portal route to add even more talent. She needs to be able to go 12 deep with elite scholarship players. I think she's going to get there next year, and next year she'll have better shooters to be able to run her system. So watch out for Kim Caldwell. They will be national title contenders every year now going forward. The show represented by Banks & Jones. Tennessee's trial attorneys play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. Live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. We are live every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Dave will be back in tomorrow. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Please hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn your notifications on, tell a friend. We're building a lot of fun stuff here at Off the Hook Sports. We want you to be a part of it, and it's getting better and better by the day. Again, we will be back on tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you all for tuning in. With Caleb Calhoun, this has been a presentation of